Hey everybody, I'm Ghost Boy, and I'm here to spread some Christmas joy. If you want to celebrate the Yuletide but still get terrified, then this is the video for you. Today I'm talking about 10 more of the best modern Christmas horror movies. None of these movies are in order from best to worst, but number 1 is my favorite. Once Upon a Time at Christmas, and the sequel, The Nights Before Christmas. Now, we've all seen movies about a killer dressed as Santa Claus, but what makes these movies so special is Santa and Mrs. Claus. My main complaint with all the movies with the killer dressed as Santa Claus is that the killer always looks so ridiculous because he's wearing a fake beard and some bright red and white costume, but the Santa Claus in this movie is terrifying. His face is half burnt off, he's missing an eye, he has a thick Irish accent, his Santa suit is all worn, covered in dirt and blood, and he has a real beard and not some silly, cheesy, fake white beard. And out of all the movies with the killer Santa Claus, I think this is the first time I've seen a movie with a killer Mrs. Claus. And I'm gonna be completely honest, she's literally Harley Quinn. She has blonde hair, pigtails, she uses a giant bat, and she's crazy as hell, and insanely in love with Santa, the same way Harley Quinn is in love with the Joker. The first movie is called Once Upon a Time at Christmas. When a serial killer couple dressed as Santa and Mrs. Claus terrorizes a small town, a teenage girl and the town's sheriff must solve the pattern behind the seemingly random homicides. This movie is entertaining, and I like the mystery of why the killers are going after these specific people, but this movie uses that stupid CGI blood, and that kind of ruins all of the kills for me, because CGI blood almost always looks laughably bad. So if you hate CGI blood like I do, you might just want to watch the second movie and skip the first one. The Nights Before Christmas. Thank God they don't use that terrible CGI blood in this movie, so the kills are actually enjoyable and look great. So in the first movie, it's a small town police force trying to catch the killers, but in this one, it's the FBI trying to catch them. And we actually get some backstory on Mrs. Claus and Santa Claus. Once again, they seem a lot like Harley Quinn and the Joker, because Santa and Mrs. Claus were both in a mental hospital or an insane asylum. That's where they met, and they were both terribly abused by the staff of the hospital. So now in this movie, they're trying to get revenge on anyone who hurt them, and also anyone who they think have been naughty. These movies are just fun. Honestly, you can't take them extremely seriously, but the actors who play Santa and Mrs. Claus do such a great job, they make these movies worth watching. All the creatures were stirring. This is a Christmas-themed horror anthology movie, and I wanted to give a little bit of a description for each story. The first one is a group of coworkers at their office Christmas party having a gift exchange, but then they get trapped in the office and forced to play a deadly game. The second story is about a guy doing some last-minute shopping on Christmas Eve, but then he gets locked out of his car. There's only one other car in the parking lot, and he asks them if he can borrow their phone. They seem very nice and helpful at first, but they might have sinister intentions. The third story is just a modern-day version of A Christmas Carol. A grumpy guy who hates Christmas is fighting with his neighbors, and then he gets visited by 3 demons. The fourth story is the shortest, and there's not much to it. A man is driving home and accidentally hits a deer and kills it, but little did he know that it's not just a normal deer, but it's Blitzen the reindeer. In the fifth and final story, I can't talk about it very much because I don't want to spoil it. A group of people want to throw a surprise Christmas party for their friend, but he seems very nervous and wants to be left alone. He keeps staring at the moon, and then he gets out large metal chains. You think maybe he's a werewolf and he's trying to chain himself up so he doesn't hurt anybody, but then there's a big twist and it goes in a totally different direction than you think it was going. If you love horror anthologies like I do and you're looking for more Christmas horror movies to watch, then you should definitely add this one to your wish list. Toys of Terror. A husband and wife who are in the business of selling and renovating houses spend Christmas with their kids in an old secluded mansion with a dark past. When I heard about this movie, I thought it would be some cheaply made indie movie, but I was surprised to find out this movie is actually made by Warner Brothers Entertainment. So it looks really nice in terms of visuals and cinematography. They did a really good job of making everything feel very creepy and eerie. I know this movie isn't perfect. I honestly think the evil toys look pretty silly and aren't very intimidating. But people love movies like Chucky, Annabelle, and The Boy, so if you're really into those movies, why not give this one a try? This is a very eerie, atmospheric Christmas horror movie about family, phantoms, and killer toys. And if you're looking for a creepy Christmas movie that's a little more lighthearted, but still has some horror elements, then you should give this movie a chance. Christmas Presents. A diverse group of friends gather for the festive holiday season in a remote lodge, but soon things take a turn for the worst. One of the friends goes missing, and the truth behind why the lodge was booked for the holidays is revealed. Christmas quickly turns to chaos and a bloody nightmare. It's hard for me to talk about this movie because I don't want to spoil anything, but something this movie does extremely well is keeps you guessing and wondering what is actually going on. It keeps throwing you off track of what is actually happening. You don't know if there's a killer on the loose, or if there's something paranormal going on, or if the characters are part of a cult. This is another one of those movies that I watched and didn't think much of it, but afterwards I started thinking about it more, so I watched it again, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm surprised nobody has talked about this movie, especially when talking about Christmas horror movies. If you're looking for more Christmas horror movies, then I highly recommend you check out Christmas Presents. Black Christmas, 2019. Hawthorne College is quieting down for the holidays, as students travel home to spend time with their families. But as Riley and her sorority sisters prepare to deck the halls, a mysterious cloaked figure starts to leave a bloody trail throughout the campus. Refusing to become helpless victims, Riley and her friends decide to band together and fight back against the psychotic Christmas killer. This movie gets so much hate, and it's not fair because it's actually a really good movie. There's two reasons people hate this movie. The first reason is because this isn't like either of the other two Black Christmas films at all, and it's something completely different. And the second reason people hate this movie is because there's a very strong message about feminism and women's rights. But if you only hate this movie because it's trying to inspire women to stand up for themselves and not be pushed around by men, then you're an asshole and you can fuck off. This movie reminded me a lot of the 2021 remake of Slumber Party Massacre, because that movie kept a few elements from the original, but also added a lot of new things to the story, as well as having a strong message about feminism and women's rights. This movie doesn't just deal with the fearfulness of a serial killer, but it's also brave enough to talk about real-life horrors, such as sexual assault. And that means a lot to me, and I'm sure it means a lot to many other people too. This is a fun, inspiring Christmas horror movie with great characters and a strong message behind it. And I don't care if people want to hate on me for liking this movie. I love it, and I'm not going to change my mind. ATM. After leaving their company Christmas party one night, 3 coworkers are on their way home, but decide to stop for pizza. They need cash, so they go to an ATM. But in the parking lot, they see a man get murdered by a hooded figure. Now they're trapped inside the ATM vestibule and stalked by the killer. When I was first watching this, I was a little worried that it was going to be really boring because the 3 main characters are in the ATM for a majority of the movie, and the first 25 minutes or so are pretty slow. But then when stuff starts happening, it gets really intense, really fast. I'm not claustrophobic, but this movie made me feel like I was. So if you get claustrophobic or you're scared or paranoid to be in small places, then this movie is definitely going to freak you out. The ATM is right next to a Christmas tree lot, so I thought that was a cool way of subtly making this feel more like a Christmas horror movie. This movie manages to do a lot with very little. It's intense, suspenseful, and keeps you guessing. I don't understand why people hate it so much. I think it's a great movie, and I love it even more since it takes place around Christmas. Red Snow. A struggling horror novelist is spending Christmas alone in her snowy cabin. It seems like it's going to be a normal, quiet Christmas, until she finds an injured bat that transforms into a vampire. Now she must hide the wounded creature in her garage and help protect him from vampire hunters. This is a very cozy-feeling Christmas movie, even though it gets pretty bloody at some parts. There's Christmas music playing throughout the movie, and the main girl has her cabin all decorated for Christmas. This is a Christmas comedy vampire horror movie. It's really unique, and was a very surprisingly great movie. Dead End. On Christmas Eve, a family are on their way to their grandma's house for the holidays. The father decides to take a shortcut, but it turns out to be a terrible mistake, as the family now find themselves lost on a never-ending road in the middle of the forest. I debated for a long time whether or not I should put this movie on my list, mainly just because I don't think it's very Christmassy. It does take place on Christmas Eve, and the family sings Christmas songs and they have Christmas presents with them, but visually and story-wise, I just didn't get a very Christmassy feeling from this movie. However, I did really enjoy this film, and I think it's a very great underappreciated movie, and I figured since not a lot of people have talked about it, then I would talk about it. I actually can't say very much about it because I don't want to spoil anything, but this movie is absolutely creepy. And I know I might use that word a lot, but that's what I felt when I was watching this. I just kept thinking, this is very creepy and ominous. There's a pretty well-known urban legend called The Vanishing Hitchhiker, and this movie takes a lot of inspiration from that story, and I'm not gonna lie, it scared the shit out of me. Out of all the movies on this list, this one is probably the least Christmassy, but the most scary. Christmas. Bloody Christmas. It's Christmas Eve, and the owner of a record store just wants to get drunk, but when a robotic Santa Claus at a nearby toy store goes haywire and begins a killing spree through her small town, she's forced into a battle for survival. Now, when I first heard the description of this movie, I thought it was going to be really silly. I mean, an evil robot Santa Claus? That sounds like an episode of Scooby-Doo. But it's actually more like a Christmas version of The Terminator. This movie definitely lives up to the name. It is very bloody and has some really awesome violent kills. Santa is a kick-ass crazy Christmas killer. Something that surprised me about this movie is that it actually has likable characters. The two main characters are co-workers, and they constantly argue with each other about movies and music. And you probably think that sounds really annoying, but it surprisingly wasn't, and they actually have a very cute friendship. Also, this is one of the most visually Christmassy Christmas horror movies I've seen in a long time. Throughout the whole movie, there's red and green neon Christmas lights, and I found it very aesthetically pleasing. Whoever worked on the lighting and cinematography in this movie did an amazing job, because the whole movie just looks and feels very Christmassy. Throughout this whole movie, it's also snowing non-stop, which makes it feel even more Christmassy. This movie only came out this year, but I can already tell it's a new Christmas classic that I will watch every year around Christmas. And now, for the number 1 Christmas horror movie on my list. Unholy Night. A lonely nurse working the night shift on Christmas Eve befriends an elderly patient who tells her terrifying tales of the most wonderful time of the year. This Christmas, evil comes home for the holidays. Hospitals are scary enough in real life, and especially scary in horror movies. There's so many different Halloween horror anthology movies, but it seems like it's hard to find good Christmas horror anthologies. Besides A Christmas Horror Story, this is the best Christmas-themed anthology horror movie I've seen. The whole aesthetic and vibe of this movie is screaming Christmas. They did a great job at making this movie feel like a Christmas movie. There's snow everywhere, people get killed with Christmas decorations, people are wearing Christmas sweaters, and of course all the stories take place on Christmas. The stories are all great, the hospital setting is creepy, and the Christmas vibe is amazing. This is definitely a great Christmas horror anthology, and I highly recommend it. Well, that's the end of my video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you all have a merry, scary Christmas. It's December 25th, we've opened all the gifts, saw the relatives we've missed. I can't wait for next Christmas.